Welcome back to the Synergistic CX podcast. This is part 2 of our 3-part episode where we're focusing on customer experience at fast food restaurants with our special guest from the United States, Dan Cosgrove from Mercantile Systems in San Francisco. In the previous segment, we discussed how fast food restaurants handle responses to online reviews and also how the marketing mix is reflected in those reviews. Now we'll turn our attention to what really defines the success in this industry, which is the customer journey. Whether it's ordering through a mobile app, picking up a takeout meal, dining in, or possibly using a third-party delivery service, every single interaction along the way shapes how the brand is perceived. And in an environment where expectations are rising and patience is shrinking, every single touch point has the potential to elevate or undermine the customer experience. Let's start by talking about the customer journey, also known as the marketing funnel. So the customer journey starts with a very basic concept, which is the need identification and exploration. And that's identified here on this road. The customer journey is kind of like driving in a car. It's the journey that the customer undertakes when they're interacting with the brand. So they start with their need identification. So this is, I want some food. And at that point, they proceed down the journey of exploring their options. They review what's available online and offline. And then they move on down. And the customer journey in this particular industry can vary a bit depending on what type of mechanism the customer is using to interact with the brand. So are they going there in person? Are they going through the drive-through? Are they sitting down? Or are they possibly using a third-party delivery service? For our study here, we're going to focus on the customer journey involving in-person dining. So this is someone actually going to the store. And we move through the various parts of the customer journey, and each one of those is a step in the customer journey. And as they progress, they'll move through actually ordering some food, buying some food, and so on. And ultimately, at the end, the hope is that their perception of the brand is so high that it continues and carries on into the actual loyalty side of things. So they're spreading word about the brand and talking about the great experience. They're becoming a repeat customer and so on. So we've got here on this next slide, across the top, we've got 5 stages. And what we've done is we've mapped the customer journey to these 5 stages. So you can see across the top, we've got awareness, consideration, conversion, retention, and advocacy. And for our industry studies, we actually map the results against each of these stages. And we always use 5 because these seem to be consistent across all industries, regardless of what type of industry it is with respect to customer experience. Then we take the different steps and we map to 11 different steps underneath those 5 stages. So you'll see these columns here where underneath awareness, we have the need identification and exploration. And below that, we have all the different touch points that the customer might interact with, such as apps or social media, various other portions of their experience. And then down below that, we actually have some breakdown of different CX methodologies that can be used to measure these particular steps of the customer journey. What we do is we take the various reviews that are online that we've polled, and we will feed those into an AI-driven system using aspect-based sentiment analysis that maps the reviews and the sentiments and the comments that the customers leave against the various touch points and steps of the customer journey. And then we take all of that and we will put it on a map, the customer journey map. So this will be our big visual where we show how the fast food industry is actually performing across the different steps. So that takes us to our next step, which is the moment of truth, where we'll get to see how the industry is actually performing across each of these steps and the stages. Does anybody have any particular guesses on what we might see here?
No, let's see. I don't.
All right. Emil, Chris, any comments?
Well, how we have seen it that most people complain about product and service. So I would say that in the conversion is where we have more spots in this graphic.
to me, people complain about everything. So I'm sure we'll see something that we have not seen so far.
Yeah, in the past, I have done many projects that we used to say that contact centers were used to vent out. You just call to scold someone, and now to work in retail is in fast food. It's a real challenge for employees because people are not only complaining, but they are actually losing their patience in a level that goes much beyond what is acceptable in terms of interaction with employees. So yeah, that's true. People complain a lot.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Okay, well, let's see. Oh, so this is one of the less green ones that we've seen. So let's explain what we're looking at here for our audience. So what we have across the bottom of this customer journey map is each of the steps from the previous slide. And moving from left to right, that is representing the experience that the customer experiences when they're dealing with one of these brands. So they'll start off on the left with their need identification and exploration, and then they move into reviewing menu options online and offline and so forth, and greetings from the restaurant staff. As they progress to the right, they continue through the other steps. The line itself represents the average of that particular step, how the online reviews fared with regards to that particular step. And you can see it moving up and down as it moves through the various parts of the customer journey. The circles represent how frequently the aspects inside of that particular step of the customer journey were mentioned. So if we look here, the largest circle is under the dining experience and food quality section. So that particular step of the customer journey was mentioned quite a bit. And I think no one's surprised by that. A lot of people are going to comment about their dining experience and the food quality. That's a big reason why you go to the restaurant in the first place. And so some of the other areas are not frequently mentioned as much. For example, seasonal promotions and menu updates on the right there, very minimally mentioned. The other thing that you see here is this large gray blob, which we'll talk about in a moment. But before we dive into the comments there, let's just talk about this generally. So, Emil, I think you were definitely on point with identifying that people like to complain about everything. There's quite a bit here that's said. Dan, do you have any particular comments here on any steps that surprise you or anything that you see all the time in your work?
Yeah, well, I'll say you got a lot of really good information in there. There's a lot of data to be digested, and what we see with these types of voice of customer type surveys is statistics come into play here, and you'll see kind of a pattern, and it shouldn't change too much. And that's what we tell our clients: look for the big changes. Like you have a district manager or an area VP or somebody that changed and philosophies changed. Are we seeing dips and digging in deeper? And what's really neat with this is I think if we had the time to drill down, this would be like super huge to be able to dig in to say, what is it exactly? Where is it going on? What's taking place? Where are the nuances? What are the things like? That's where AI will be real big. I think that's what you dug out a lot with this as well. So not necessarily surprised on what we're seeing at this high level, but what intrigues me is if we were able to dig deeper in to see where it's happening and tell us why.
Mm-hmm. Definitely, yeah. There's definitely some red areas there in the conversion stage. If you look right in the middle there, we've got some areas that definitely need some attention: the order placement and customization, the interaction with the service staff, and payment and loyalty programs. So there's some room for improvement there for sure. And that maps very well against what we saw with the marketing mix, the negative reviews there. Definitely.
Well, and I'll add, Eric, what we did not too long ago for a client is we took basically this information here from the system, right? And we pulled it out and we started to analyze it. And we were able to tell these clients what regions are challenged and why. And what we helped them understand was any region you had that had a location 20 plus miles further from another one is where your challenges were laid, because your regional is too far to travel to those places regularly to provide them with what they needed to have. And once we took this data like from here and then boiled it down and applied some analytics to it, we were able to show them, and it was pretty glaring, like, oh my God, this is what's going on. And then for them, they need to decide, what do we do? Do we put another regional on? Do we try to do this or that? And, but they then had the data and the intelligence that told them exactly what's going on and why. And because the volume and statistics, it was going to be, factual.
Well, just to, I guess, share an observation that I see here. In the previous industry studies, what we have seen is that the brands seem to focus on the conversion. So the center of the conversion, the central three steps at least, tend to perform the best, speaking relatively to the other steps of the journey. And to some extent, what we see here is a reversed journey where the conversion actually performs almost the worst. We are used to seeing the retention being or having the lowest performance across the board, across pretty much almost all micro industries that we have surveyed so far. The retention steps are do score the lowest performance, but the conversion is usually the highlight. And what we see here is that it is actually the opposite. Mm-hmm. And this gray area, this gray band that follows the average, that is actually the one standard deviation. And what we see is that this distribution of one standard deviation does not even venture into the fair area. It stays in the attention area, in the red area, consistently throughout the central stages of central step of the conversion process. So it's consistently negative experience in the conversion process, what we see here.
That is a very, very interesting note, that this is for the gray blob behind things. Yeah, with that measuring effectively the consistency of the experience. It's one of the tightest studies that we've seen. I mean, it's consistently, these averages are what they are, but the consistency of the standard deviation there is also, I think, one of the tightest we've seen. And back to what you were saying earlier, Dan, one of the observations here, if you look at the dining experience and food quality, well, food quality, ultimately, you're getting down to the product, right? And that's very heavily mentioned. And it's also very tight. I mean, that's a very narrow band of gray right there. So they're consistent. It looks like people aren't really raving about it a whole lot, but they're at least consistent in that area very strongly. But yeah, there's definitely some areas to improve.
Yeah, I think that's interesting, because I guess not surprising when we talk about how fast computers move in business and industries. We don't think about it in restaurants, but QSR and fast food, it's moving at the speed of light. You've got to come up with this. You got to do this. We're changing this. I mean, COVID pushed that, obviously, but it just seems to keep going. And now you layer AI on. And where that can help, we have conversations with clients. It's like their heads are blowing up with all the areas that it could help in, and what do we attack and what do we do, and how does it work for the guest experience. But when you go in, and I'll back up to again that one Mexican restaurant that I went to, that quick serve, I bet weekly they're probably changing different types of things to help get the food out and get it out the door and go there. But can you focus on an in-dining guest experience? No. You don't have that luxury to be able to do that always. And so it's not a surprise that experience is like that. And if you drive around in America today and you drive by these places, their drive-throughs are crazy. Exclude the Chick-fil-A's and In-N-Out Burgers, who, it's a 20, 30-minute experience to get through. Some of your traditional large players too, though, I'm surprised at the drive-throughs on how busy they are, not including all the delivery. It's amazing. And if you don't have a drive-through, it's going to be the death of you, right? Because, I went into one of the burger places about 6 months, maybe a year ago. And I remember I was the only person in there dining. And you can tell, like, no one's dined in there in like a month, it felt like, because there was just no attention to the detail of the spot anymore. It wasn't horrible. It just wasn't anything. And it's not because they don't want to pay attention to it. They just don't have to. It's just not where people are going. So yeah, that experience is not what's going to drive the people coming through and where they're going to spend time. It's all the other things that they're battling.
Yeah, and that is interesting to see, Dan, because I did a study a year ago in this topic. And one of the main findings was the challenge to deal with complaints when the customer is not in the location anymore. So if it's via drive-through or a delivery service, it's totally different than if you are in the store, in the restaurant, and then you can say, see, I ordered this without pickles, and I have pickles in my burger. And I have this experience myself many times, going to a large fast food chain and buying food for 3 kids to eat in the park. And after you cross everything with 3 kids and lots of packets, you arrive there and there is something wrong with your order. I mean, it's very hard to go back and complain. It's much easier to vent out and complain on the reviews than going back with the packages and the kids and everything.
Yeah.
And if you use a lot of drive-through in the US, for example, you have already waited a lot for your order, and then you finally start driving, and when your time to open your package, your burger is wrong, or your drink is not the one that is selected, or your customization is not the one that you asked for. So definitely it's much more challenging than if it was an in-person in-dining experience.
It's true, that's hard. And then what's probably, maybe we can argue worse, is I'll use this story. So about 10 years ago or so, I'm at this restaurant at the bar having a drink and I get some food. I'm talking to the gentleman next to me and he asks, so what do you do? And I said, we do this mystery shopping program, yada, yada, yada. And I said, this is one of our clients. He goes, oh, that's your client? I can't stand it. He was a golfer. It was one of our golf clients. He says, I was there and I always get an 8 a.m. tea time. And I got there, they ignored me. They pushed me off because of a tournament. He went on and on and on and on about how bad it was. And I said, gosh, when did this happen? He goes, 20 years ago. And I went, oh my God. Can you imagine first of all, the passion in this man to hold that for 20 years was amazing. Like, good for you to hold that much passion, I guess. But how many times has he told that story over the 20 years, And so I was working with the CEO a lot. So I called him, and this is the time before email and stuff. So I left him a voicemail. Dave, blah, 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 blah. I told him the story just like that. And their system was able to push that. Here's what Dave did. He pushed that message that I did to everybody in the company. Look what Cosgrove experienced. And that, of course, made everybody mad because they were calling me going, why are you telling Dave all this stuff? I had hundreds of calls coming into me. But the reality was that was the reality, and that's what goes on. So, it can be a challenge. And then to your point, how do I get back and report back? I'm spending a lot of money now to do this. And my experience is this, it's just not gonna fly.
And I think it's interesting to point out too, how important the product is here. Obviously, on the moment of truth, there we saw that it was very heavily mentioned that in the quality and experience of the service, but the product is going to be key across all of the different channels, whether it's a third-party delivery service or in-person or drive-through or whatever the mechanism might be of delivery. Would you say, in that case, Dan, that we've been talking a lot about the subjective types of CX measurement here. We've talked about voice of the customer surveys. We've talked about, obviously, online reviews and ratings. But would you say that this really emphasizes the need for objective measurement methods such as mystery shopping and internal audits with respect to the product?
Yeah, well, so that's a good question because here's how we share with our clients, right? I'll go back to this. You hire them. Here's what typically happens. You hire them, you train them, and then you measure them from voice of the customer. And you're assuming that your team members are doing what you train them to do because you're saying our customers are saying this is the experience they're having. The problem that they miss a lot is the measurement piece in between, meaning are they truly doing that? So you mystery shop them to not voice the customer or the customer experience. You're mystery shopping them to make sure they're doing what you're asking them to do. And then only then can you listen to the voice of the customer and say, okay, they're doing 80, 85%, 90% of what we're asking them to do. Now our voice of the customer is accurate, meaning this is what we're getting in the experience. And if it's not what you like, then you change the training, measure again, make sure they're doing it in the voice of the customer. But what happens in this space is money's limited, it's super tight. They pick one or the other, or maybe not, but they don't usually do both. And so it's not uncommon when we're having a conversation. Well, how do you measure employee performance? Well, we rate them on voice of the customer or social media reviews. Well, that's not right. And flip that around. We do mystery shopping. We ask the shoppers how their experience. Well, they're tainted. They're already asked to go in with your measurement piece of what they're supposed to do. And so if the customer had this experience or the mystery shopper experience, they may rate it bad because they didn't hit the points, but they didn't know that. And a perfect example is years ago when we got this big chain of full serve restaurants. Before meeting with them, I went to the restaurant to dine, and I was in my 40s, came in dressed like this. Server was great. We connected, had a good time, socialized, yada, yada, yada. If I would have took a voice of the customer survey, I'd have said he's great, friendly, food was good, engaging. Would I come back? Yeah. Would I tell my friends? If I took a mystery shop, he would have failed. He never mentioned me a beer, and the place has brew house in its name. He never suggested a beer. He never suggested an appetizer. He bought me a salad that wasn't mine, put it on my table. I told him it's not mine. He picked it up and served it to another table, which is not against regulations. And so he would have failed miserably. And I think that shows the difference of what happens here. And we know for a fact when places are mystery shopping, this isn't a plug for mystery shopping, it's a plug for measurement of employees, because they're doing things. We're in an airport and they say, I'm buying a candy bar. And she says, do you want a water with that? And I said, you get mystery shopped? And she said, yeah. I said, I figured. Because you wouldn't be offering me a water if you weren't being held accountable to this, right? And so that's kind of the whole gamut of how it goes. But you got to have the resources or ability to be able to do it.
Mm-hmm. Makes sense. Do you find that a lot of your clients end up kind of pivoting back and forth, like they'll run a mystery shopping program for a while to find out what's being trained and what those, if the training is sticking, and then they'll shift that budget from mystery shopping over to, say, a voice of customer survey to measure the results there?
Yeah, it really depends on where they're at. So a lot of our clients that are, and people will say to me when I'm out and about at an event or something, what do you do? And I'll share with them, we measure employee performance for a consistent positive guest experience, something like that. Well, blah, 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 blah. Oh, you know who you need to shop. You need to shop, blah, 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 blah. And I stopped saying, listen, if they need our service, they're probably not doing a good job. They've got to want to do it. And so that's kind of the thing, the clients that work with us and probably most of our competitors, that they want to. So they find a way to do both and get it. Like, it's not expensive to do voice of the customer. And we'll talk about that in a minute too, about some modifications in that space, but it can get expensive to do mystery shop. And so how do you leverage it? But yeah, if they're really ambitious, like, the client Pollo Campero, who's going to be on later, we're doing everything, like every piece of drive-in, takeout, delivery, phone, every customer touch point is being measured, and then that data is being analyzed, and then against voice of the customer, because they're super, super committed to that experience. But they also know, and where they're growing and where they're at, like some of these other companies out there, like they've got to have that. Like if you're a high quality QSR chicken restaurant, like you're charging $12 for a meal with a chicken sandwich, a fry, and a beverage. Like, it better be good. It better be consistent and good, right? But if you're a $6 box of something, it's got to be here. So it doesn't have to be the same. And so they might not have to go through and measure all that. Other companies might take a look at spot checking and things like that, but it's really trying to figure out what their budget can do and then where they're trying to get. And you got to match that up.
And it's also a matter of seeing customer experience as a strategic investment and to look at the return on investment that this kind of initiatives can have in the bottom line.
So what we'll see is, again, the commitment to be able to spend the resources to do that. But the pie's only so big, right? And they've got lots of places that are pulling from that pie. And so it's not that they don't want to do it. It's not that they don't understand that it's important and key, or I shouldn't say that it could be very valuable. It's just where you're going to put the resources. And we often find in the time of recessionary times, our business gets busier, because when times are really good in whatever industry it is, when you talk to them, they're, money's going different places. We're okay. But all of a sudden, when sales drop, numbers drop, things drop, what is it that you do? How is it that you do it? And then they start having these conversations. And so that's kind of how our industry at least tends to flow of what we've seen. And I'll say this too, when I was in Milan last year, okay, take it for what it's worth. My first meal in Milan was McDonald's. All right. I had to have McDonald's. We're get up the bus. I'm like, oh, there's McDonald's. Let's go eat McDonald's. My wife's like, no way. I said, we're going to McDonald's. So the place is packed. It's packed. It doesn't have drive-through because not a lot of drive-through through Europe, right? And the experience is wall-to-wall people, but they've put systems in place to make it the best they can. And the service was great. The cleanliness was great. It was really, really good for what it was. And they're taking that to heart to put it in place. And that goes back to walk-in processes. But here in the US, when you have walk-in, drive-through, delivery, and all that, it just pushes on all these components.
Yeah.
So it's obviously important if they're going to dive into the world of CX, they need to really work with someone who understands all the different types of measurements and pros and cons and budgets and everything else.
That, I think, we've got something going on here with AI, right? And so, we're in San Francisco, so we're in the heart of it, right? I've got people that work for Open AI, and it's changing everything, and you've got to look at things different. And, I'll say years ago when we would do a lot of voice of customer, I'd say the gold is in the data, the gold flakes are in the commentary. And we used to take that commentary the day before and we'd pull it into Excel, a database, do some kind of sorting, some searching. And we were successful at being able to share with our clients, hey, we think you have a theft problem at this location. You have a service problem, and your service problem is focused around here. And we could pull it from the comments because the customers were saying things, but not knowing what they were saying. Like they're saying, I'm not getting receipt, or they messed up my change. And you would see this repetition. And we could see that in different areas. So we're able to pull that and focus and say, here's the problem you're having at this store, to the point. And today's world with AI, we're able to do that really, really good. We're playing with the ability of, again, I don't know, is Yelp, Google reviews going to go away? I don't know, but I can tell you, reviews here where I can speak to it on my experience afterwards and say, here's what I experienced. Food was okay. This was this, blah, 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 blah. Give me 20 seconds, dump it, take that, turn it into text, run it through an LLM and start analyzing mass amounts of that is where I see this going. It's a lot of the things we're playing with.
Mm-hmm. Great. All right. So let's look at our key takeaways here from looking at our moment of truth. Staff interactions, as we saw, are a critical weakness. There's a lot of red in that center area there. The order placement and payment process is a focus area. Elevating the dining experience, it always helps. And you want to focus on refining retention efforts and also improving the consideration stage. The first impressions tend to matter, the types of things that are going to invite the customers into the store or possibly online to make that order in their mobile app or on the website. So now let's talk about the marketing mix funnel matrix in fast food restaurants. So taking this one step further, we're going to take our results and map them against the marketing mix funnel matrix, or as we call it here at the CX channel, we call it the MFM. And what you see here on this particular chart is across the top, you've got those 5 different stages of awareness, consideration, conversion, retention, and advocacy. And then down the left side, you see the 7 Ps of the marketing mix that we've used: the product, people, place, process, price, promotion, and physical evidence. And we've got these red bars, which are the proportion of the negative reviews for that particular stage and mapped against that particular part of the marketing mix. So what you can see here is that inside of the conversion stage, you'll see at the very top there on the product row that almost 30% of the negative reviews are mapped against that particular intersection. So if you're targeting your CX as far as trying to reduce the red, as we say, you want to try to improve the CX to get rid of that negative customer sentiment. We have the conversion stage and the product. That's one particular area where you could focus if you're one of these brands to really try to eliminate a lot of your negative perception from your customer base. You'll also see we've got here a couple other intersections. You've got the inside the conversion, there's a few more. Obviously the people, the place, and the process are all key. So the conversion stage is something that could really use some focus. And we have seen that in some of the other industries that we've looked at. The conversion stage is obviously very, very important. But also the consideration stage, the people have a very high impact there as well. And so there seems to be a lot of complaints with respect to people during the consideration stage. So that might be another good quick win to focus on with respect to this particular industry.
Let's switch gears again. So far, we have been discussing results based only on online reviews and ratings. And as we know, in the realm of voice of the customer feedback surveys are critical supplement to the more common online reviews and ratings. So in totality, both the voice of the customer surveys and the online reviews and ratings are what we consider subjective measurement programs, and they deliver the visibility on the customer thoughts and feelings and sentiment. With regards to the voice of the customer survey, which is obviously a very important tool in measuring customer thoughts and feelings and perceptions, a significant challenge for the businesses is to effectively capture valuable feedback within the constrained attention span afforded by customers. Therefore, crafting the optimal voice of the customer survey is essential as it directly influences the quality and reliability of customer insights, which are pivotal for informed decision making and strategic planning. So what we're going to do here is we're going to take the insights from the online reviews and ratings, and based on those insights, we're going to go through the steps of crafting the optimal starter voice of the customer survey. The objective here is we can define the objective as follows. What are the key questions? What are the key drivers and the drill down details that we need to capture with regards to customer feedback in a way that we minimize the amount of questions and maximize the amount of impact or coverage that we can cover. So what we're suggesting here is a very simple starter, quote unquote, voice of the customer survey structure, where we start with a primary question, then we go through 5 key driver questions, which represent the top 5 areas or aspects or intersections of the mixed funnel matrix that we discussed earlier. And we close with a closing question. Usually the primary question is a satisfaction question, and the closing question is an NPS question. So let's see how this is done in practice. What we suggest is we simply take the mixed funnel matrix, and as Erik discussed earlier, we see that close to 30% of the negative feedback is in the intersection of product conversion. So the top 3 negative intersections are conversion product, consideration people, and conversion process. And then if we drill down into what do customers talk about, and this is what we can see in the second table here on this slide. If we drill down into the steps of the customer journey stages in these cells, we would see in the data that the weakest performing step with regards to those 3 cells is, with regards to conversion and product, the dining experience and food quality. And the question that we'll ask here is, how satisfied were you with the dining experience and the food quality? Then the second most prevalent, weakest performing step is consideration people. The step is greeting from restaurant staff. The question would be, how satisfied were you with the greeting provided by the restaurant staff? And the third weakest performing step is the conversion process. The step being order placement and customization, and consequently we'll ask the question, how satisfied were you with the order placement and customization process? And the other 2 questions or weakest performing steps are interaction with service staff and restaurant ambience. So those are the 5 critical drivers that we'll take into consideration with regards to building the voice of the customer survey. Why? Because the highest amount of negative feedback is within these 5 weakest performing steps. And then if we look at the starter VOC survey in its completed format, we'll start with a customer satisfaction question, a CSAT question, which will be how satisfied are you with the brand, which will be followed by the 5 key driver questions, which we just went through. And then for each driver question, if the answer is below 5 stars, then we suggest that we go through a more detailed, pointed drill down question, which will explore the key driver in detail. For example, for the key driver greeting provided by the restaurant staff, what we will ask is what did not meet the expectations, and we'll offer the 5 most frequent complaints from the online reviews and ratings. In this case, the prompt, welcome, warm and friendly attitude, a courteous greeting, positive body language, and willingness to assist. So just to summarize, the way that we suggest the starter voice of the customer survey be built is by taking the areas with the highest concentration of negative reviews collected from the online reviews and ratings, taking that into consideration, building this starter voice of the customer survey with CSAT starter question, NPS closing question, and 5 key driver questions in between the two. And with that, we'll conclude the subjective measurement methods. Erik?
Dan, we've seen here an example of how organizations can create a VOC program, a survey like this. It's relatively straightforward. And that would focus on priority topics that were identified in this particular study. What other methodologies and initiatives would you suggest to a company who was in this industry?
Yeah, I think this is one of the most exciting in the CX area for AI, right? I think AI is going to just flip this on its head. The things that we're looking at today, if we look at that, is good. You need to have it. It's high level, but it's a bit markety in a sense. Like, when a restaurant's volume goes up, marketing's patting themselves on the back saying we drove sales, right? And ops is saying we did it here, but no one really knows like why. It's not always conclusive. Like, was it because this movie next door was really good, or for some reason traffic got diverted down this street and it just drove sales? Like, you never really always know. And that's a bit like the voice of the customer, unless you're going to dig deep, right? Like it says, oh, well, we're having a problem here. I remember in the hospital world, they use Press Ganey, and after you have a visit, you get a survey. It's like 4 or 5 questions. It's like was the nurse's station clean? Yes or no? Like, what does that mean if they say no? Like, if you're ever in a hospital, the nurse's station is loaded with files and things like that. But that's what they get rated on, and they're all panicky. Like that's why they're all panicky to get this score. And so it's really crazy because they don't drill deep into finding out why. And so some of this, again, it gets high level, but like, why? Why is this the problem? And where does it reside? And we got to go deeper. And this is where I say AI is going to really spin this on its head, because as we learn how to collect more information, and like I said, if we're going to start using tools with verbal feedback, like randomly tell me your experience. Like, you'd never want to do that before, because how do you aggregate that and put it into these kind of files? But today you can, with LLMs and training it, and the fact that they learn because of the nuance of them, and generative AI allows us to do this with proper prompting and understanding. You're going to be able to do these things, and you're going to be able to say, tell me what's wrong with this store. Like, what's the problem in service? And it's going to come back and it's going to let you know. And you're going to tell statistically what's the challenge. Like, is it statistically sound? And then you're going to be able to prompt your corrections in there and say, well, how do we correct it? Like, we're already doing photos of food. We take the photo of the food our shopper gets and the corporate photo, and we use AI and say, compare the two. Tell us the problem and what's right. And within 97% accuracy, it tells us this chicken is cooked wrong because of this, because they left it on the rack too long. And when they pulled it off, the skin stuck to the rack And that's what's creating this appearance, or it's greasy. And so in this world, CX area, for voice of the customer, AI is going to be the big thing that's going to really change things, understanding that.
Great. This is the end of part 2 of our 3-part episode here on the Synergistic CX podcast, where we're focusing on fast food restaurants. In the next segment, we will have a more in-depth discussion with our special guest, Daniel Cosgrove from Mercantile Systems, regarding the customer experience in this industry and also customer experience in general. Remember that you can download the details of this study for free on our website, cx-channel.com. And you can follow the CX channel on LinkedIn, YouTube, or your favorite social media to stay on top of each of our monthly podcasts. And be sure to press that subscribe button so you don't miss our next episode.